All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our Wednesday Zoom and Learn. Mary Jane and myself have a great Zoom and Learn for you with a guest speaker, Ray with CRMLS. He was going to join us and go through top 10 violations. And he's going to share his insight, how you guys can stay clean out there, and what to avoid, etc. I encourage everybody to ask questions in one of two ways. Either during the presentation, put them in the chat, and I'll monitor that. And if it's something that I think needs to be answered right away, I'll interrupt and get it answered for you. Or at the end of the presentation, we will open it up to questions and answers, obviously, at the end. That will allow you to ask great questions in regards to the presentation. All right, so without further ado, Ray, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And maybe if you could briefly tell everybody who you are and what your role is, etc. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tommy. Yeah, once again, I'd just like to thank everyone for having me today, and you know, hopefully we can spread some knowledge here. And like I was saying before, I think before everyone came in the room, anything that we can do to help our members avoid committing violations is well worth the effort. So a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Ray Santrach. I'm a team lead with the CRMLS compliance department. I've been working there for several years, and the presentation today that I'm going to be going over is in two sections. The first is an overview of the most common violations that my department finds on a daily basis, and more importantly, how to not commit them. The second section is going to be over the new changes implemented due to the adoption of the Clear Cooperation Policy and what that means for you, our members. So that being said, we'll roll right into it. So a little bit about CRMLS right off the bat. It is a broker cooperative. It's not a technology company. We provide an environment that encourages our members to both cooperate and compensate each other to get their listings sold and or leased. Compliance is the cooperation product. So ultimately what my department endeavors to do is to provide clean and accurate data, or at least as clean and accurate as possible, to you, our members, so that it'll help you go about your jobs. One benefit of that is, you know, clean data for comparables. So that way, you know, when you're listing a property, you can go in there and find out what a good, you know, market entry point for that property is. That's just one example. There's quite a few ways you can use the database. But like I said, compliance is the cooperation product. Ultimately, the data must be accurate, or as accurate as possible. That is so to provide a fair playing field for all of our users. So where do the rules come from? Ultimately, they're based on the model rules developed by C.A.R. and N.A.R. Additional rules are proposed by the CRMLS Rules Committee. This committee includes a representative from every member association of CRMLS. All rules must be approved by the CRMLS Board of Directors. So this is something I want to kind of put on blast here. The CRMLS Compliance Department does not write the rules, and we don't decide what finable violations incur how much of a fine. That's all approved or drafted and approved by the CRMLS CRMLS Board of Directors. So whenever anyone asks, you know, why is the fine so high, or sometimes we get, why is the fine so low? Ultimately, it's not up to us. It is up to the CRMLS Board of Directors, which again is composed by a representative of every single association that is a member of CRMLS. So where can you find the rules and policies? It's very simple, go.crmls.org, our root website. Right there you can see there's that magnifying glass that says compliance under it. That's where you'll click on to find the rules, regulations, citation policy, our knowledge base, also the live chat link to get in touch with a compliance analyst during the week. Okay, so again, speaking of compliance, here is a snippet of the CRMLS citation policy. It includes 4 columns. First is the rule. That's the section of the rules that was violated. After that is warning. This column indicates whether or not that particular violation of the rules qualifies for a warning notice, allowing the possibility of correction before a citation and fine are issued. If it says yes, that means that once we discover a violation of that particular rule, we issue a warning notice providing 2 business days for the listing agent or member to correct whatever the violation is. If the violation is corrected within those 2 business days, then no citation and fine are issued and the case is closed. Now, if it says no, that means that the board of directors has decided that that particular violation does not qualify for a warning notice before a citation and fine are issued. So a good example of something like that would be branded media. That's rule 11.5 echo. So I'm going to go into it later in more detail, but a violation of that rule, such as uploading a virtual tour that has your face, your phone number, even a voiceover, that's branded information. And uploading that into a field that says unbranded, such as virtual tour, unbranded 1 or 2, or using that link in the property description, would be a violation of rule 11.5 echo. Once we receive a report of that, or if we discover it on our own, we would immediately remove the link in violation and issue a citation and fine in accordance with this citation policy. And again, I'll speak more about that particular nature of violation later. After that column, you have summary. Summary is a brief description of the nature of the violation of that. Fairly straightforward. And then finally is the fine amount. So that is, as I was saying before, that is the fine amount that is associated with that particular violation. And again, that fine is determined by the CRMLS board of directors. So once a citation has been issued, if correction is necessary, then that violation must be corrected within 2 business days of the issuance of that citation. So it's the same for warnings or citations. If correction is necessary, a member will have 2 business days from the issuance of that notice to correct the violation. Failure to correct the violation within those 2 business days will result in the issuance of additional fines and citations, specifically Rule 14.4. So CRMLS Rule 14.4 requires that within 2 business days of being made aware of a violation, a member must correct it. Now, once a citation has been issued, the member has 2 options to prevent their MLS services from becoming eligible for suspension. The first is to submit payment for the outstanding fine that was issued. The second is, if they want to, they have the option to contest the issuance of the citation. And there's a form for that. It's on our website. It's under the compliance section of our website. It's fairly easy to locate. It's also included as a link on any notice that, or any citation notice that is issued. So what that form is for, and it's called the Citation Review Request Form. If a member believes that they were subject to extenuating circumstances, or they just want to contest the issuance of the citation based on whatever grounds they feel appropriate, that opportunity is there for them. So a member must exercise one of these 2 options within 20 calendar days of the issuance of the citation and after correcting any making any necessary correction. If the outstanding fine balance is not paid in full, or a citation review request form is not submitted within those 20 calendar days after the issuance of the citation, then unfortunately that member's account would be eligible for suspension. So here's a list of the most common violations that my department deals with on a daily basis. And I'm going to go into each one of them in detail and, more importantly, like I said, outline how to not commit them. First and foremost is photograph guidelines and restrictions. So this is all under Rules 11.5 and its various subsections. Broad strokes here is that the photos and virtual tours and any media that you submit to the MLS, first and foremost, you have to either own that media or you have to have obtained the rights and licenses required in order to reproduce it on the MLS. So one of those 2 things. The second thing I'd like to go over is branding, like I was talking about before. Photographs and virtual tours submitted to the MLS cannot contain anything on that list that you see on the slide right there. In brief, any sort of branding, so that'd be any information that identifies you as an agent, your office, any other agent, or any other office. Phone numbers, any sort of contact information, website address, email address. For sale signs or for lease signs, those I do want to talk about for a second. The sign itself actually is not a violation. So say that you're taking a photo of the front of a property and the seller or you don't want to move the for sale sign. If that sign just says for sale and there's no branded information on it, then it's not actually a violation. The violation comes from the information that's on the sign. So for instance, the difference between just a short, small sign that just says for sale in green or blue letters or what have you, that sign is very different from a sign that says, it's got the Keller Williams logo on it or the Century 21 logo, or it's got your name, your phone number, your DRE. Anything other than the words for sale or for lease could probably be considered branding. Now, if you ever have a photo that you're not sure about and you want to get the all clear on it before you upload it to the MLS, please contact us either via live chat or email and give us a copy of that photo. We are happy to review it and let you know if it's something you can use on the MLS or not. We are always happy to help a member avoid committing a violation. If they come to us and they say, hey, I don't really know what to do here, or I'm not clear on what the rules require me to do, we are happy to outline the situation for you, what the rules require, and what you can do to accomplish what you want to do without being in violation of the rules. And photos obviously are no exception. Same thing with virtual tours. So messages or solicitations. So we've seen recently virtual tours that it's an independently hosted website. You click on the link, it takes you to this tour of the property, which in and of itself is fine. But then you see on the website that there's a text box for you to enter your name, your email address, where you can click share. Those are actually solicitations of contact, and they would be considered branding under this rule. So they would not be allowed in an unbranded virtual tour. Images of people, animals, or other items not directly related to the sale of the listing, or release of the listing, I should say. So this is another thing I kind of want to go into detail about. If the image of let me backtrack a little bit, provide some context. So say that you're listing a property that's by the Santa Monica Pier, and you want to showcase the lifestyle that someone buys into by buying or leasing that property. That's fine. And when are you ever going to be able to take a photo of a pier without people on it, except maybe at 1 a.m. So what you can do, if you take a photo of that pier, again, to showcase the lifestyle that someone's getting into by buying that property, if you take a photo far enough back, there are some people in it, but they can't be identified, and they're not children, and they're not the focus of the image, then they're actually fine. That's what's called being incidental. So if you take a photo from, say, a couple hundred meters back of the pier, or you take it from an elevated position, looking down on the pier, then in all likelihood, it's going to be fine. Now, if you're listing, say, let's switch tracks here. Let's say you're listing a horse ranch, or just a ranch in general, and it's got horse stables in it. So say one of the horses out running around in the lot, and you snap a photo, or your photographer snaps a photo of the lot, and that horse is dead center of that photo. It's clearly the focus. That actually would not be allowed on the MLS. So again, as with branding, if you ever have a photo that you want to showcase the lifestyle of a property, and you want to get the all clear from the compliance department on using that photo, please send it to us in an email, or if you need an immediate response, come to us in the live chat. Virtual tours, I touched on these. They have to be listing specific and must not link to an agent or broker's website or any other website. So a lot of questions we get on this one are, can I use Vimeo or YouTube or Matterport to host my virtual tours? Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes, but the channel name on YouTube, anyone who's used YouTube, you're aware that when you upload a video, you have to upload it to your channel, a channel you create. That channel can also the name of it cannot contain any branded information. So for instance, myself, Ray Santrach, if I was an agent out there and I wanted to create a virtual tour on YouTube, I put it up there and I named the channel Ray Santrach Realty, or even just Ray Santrach. That's branded information because it identifies me as an agent. What you can do is just make up some completely unrelated name for the channel that doesn't, excuse me, that doesn't identify you, your brokerage, any other agent, or any other brokerage. Also, if the name of the channel is the photographer, and the photographer is not a real estate professional, then we actually would not consider that branding. An example of that would be Matterport. Matterport is a company that obviously they don't practice real estate, they just make virtual tours. I'm not advertising for them, I'm just providing an example. We would not consider their logo on the virtual tour branding. Also, their virtual tours typically don't contain a solicitation of contact either. So, CRMLS reserves the right to remove any media from the MLS that is in violation of this or any rule. So any photo or virtual tour that contains any information I just went over, we would remove it immediately. So copyright issues. This is also section 11.5 of the rules and regulations. And it's something I touched on before, but I'm going to go in more detail now. So by submitting media to the MLS, you, on behalf of your broker, represent that you own the rights to that media or have obtained the rights to reproduce it on the MLS. There's 3 scenarios here that I want to go over that should provide some more context for this. So scenario 1, you took the photos yourself. You don't need permission because you took the photos yourself. Now, I do want to clarify that taking a photo of the property is very different than taking a photo of the property. Some things we've seen before, kind of egregious, is someone printing out the Google Street View of a property, and that's an image, or that's an issue in and of itself. Printed out the Google Street View and then snapped a photo of the Google Street View with their phone. That is absolutely not media that you can use on the MLS. You don't own that photo. I'd also like to point out that in that specific situation, if you'll humor me, you didn't actually take a photo of the property. You took a photo of a piece of paper. So, long story short there, if you take a photo of the property itself, you own that photo, you can use it however you see fit. Scenario 2, a photographer takes the photos on your behalf. So yes, you absolutely do need to obtain that photographer's written authorization to reproduce those photos. And I'm going to show you a good example of probably the most ubiquitous form that you can use for that. But to clarify here, it is perfectly fine to use a photographer to photograph your property and then use those photos in the MLS. However, you do need to ensure that there is some sort of contract in place between yourself and that photographer in which they convey to you the rights and licenses required to reproduce that media on the MLS. If all you do is pay the photographer for those photos, the only thing that's happened is that money has changed hands. You don't own the rights to those photos, you don't own the photos, and ultimately you could not use those photos on the MLS. That's why it's important to, whenever you involve another party here to obtain those photos for you, that you must get a contract between them and yourself in which they provide you the rights and licenses to reproduce those photos on the MLS. Scenario 3, use photos from a prior listing or other website. So it says here, yes, you would need authorization, but it's kind of a misnomer because you simply could not do that. Photos from another listing in the MLS they're technically not owned by that submitting member at that point because they have that CRMLS watermark on them. By submitting media to the MLS, the reason that we require that you have these rights and licenses is because by submitting them to the MLS, you convey to CRMLS the rights and licenses required to use that media. And those rights and licenses are outlined in CRMLS Rule 11.5 Charlie. So to get back to what I was talking about here, some common examples of some fairly egregious violations of this rule are Google Street View. We've seen this, unfortunately, less commonly lately, thankfully, but it used to be very common where agents would take a screenshot or a photo of the Google Street View of a property and then use that on their listing in the MLS. That is, to be frank, unacceptable. You cannot use that on a listing in the MLS. And I'm also aware of Google's open end user license agreement, and this is a question that we get fairly often. I'm going to try to head it off here. Google does provide the public with an open end user license agreement. However, that open end user license agreement specifically states that that Google Media cannot be used for the purposes of promotion and advertisement. And which brings us to the MLS. What is the purpose of the MLS? Marketing and advertisement. So photos taken from Google Street View or like Getty Images, Yahoo, Bing, I believe Bing has a Street View as well. None of those images could be reproduced in the photo roll of a listing in the MLS. And again, this is something that just the other day, I had a member come in to chat with us. They said they sent us an email with a photo that they wanted to use for their listing in the MLS. I took a look and I saw several Google watermarks, and I told them flat out, no, you cannot use this photo, but thank you for coming to us and asking before just using it. The reason that I was so thankful for that is because a violation of this rule, specifically 11.5 Bravo or 11.5 Delta, carries a $1,500 fine per violation. So copyright is something, or copyright laws, I should say, are something that our rules take very seriously. So this is a form I mentioned before. It's a very, very good form to put in place between yourself and your photographer. The reason being is because there's not very much work required. You fill in the blanks, you both sign it, and you're good to go. And the beauty of this form too is that it can be amended to basically do whatever you need it to do. But obviously, if it's amended to not convey the rights and licenses required to use media on the MLS, then it would not support the use of media on the MLS. So something to be aware of. But this form is available, zip forms and most other document services that brokerages use. It's a very good form to use. If any of you do use photographers to take your photos, I highly recommend that you use this form. At the very least, get some sort of contract between yourself and the photographer in which they provide you the rights to use those photos on the MLS. But this is probably the best document to use right here. And again, this is the CAR Form PIA, Property Images Agreement. So continuing with photo issues, this is another one that unfortunately we find violations of this fairly often. Exterior photograph requirement. So this is Rule 11.5.1. And what the rule requires is that the listing must include at least one compliant photo or rendering of the majority of the exterior of the structure represented in the listing, and it must be uploaded to the listing within 2 calendar days of entering that listing into the MLS. Now, if a listing is canceled within the first 5 calendar days, and yes, I'm aware there is a difference there in the time frames, but that is known and that is by design. If a listing is canceled within the first 5 calendar days of entry into the MLS, the exterior photograph requirement will not apply. Now, that's only for canceled listings. If you have a listing that is sold or closed within, or any other status really, within 5 calendar days of entry into the MLS, it does require that photo still, as it says there. The second exclusion to this is business opportunity listings. And the reason being is because a business opportunity listing is not for real property, it's for a business. And as such, there's no exterior structure to photograph. So listings that are canceled within the first 5 calendar days of entry into the MLS and business opportunity listings are both exempt from this rule. However, no other listings are. Now, if you do have a listing where, say you're entering a comparable listing into the MLS, that's a listing where it's sold before processing, and you're using some form of documentation which provides a broker the authority to list the property in the MLS, such as the CAR Form RPA, you can enter that listing in the MLS. It's what's called a comparable listing entry. And what happens is you're entering that listing into the MLS, and then you will immediately close it. And effectively, it's just to get that data in there, and if you want credit for the listing in the MLS, there you go. Now, that listing is still going to require at least one exterior photograph or rendering. Now, say that you're entering it and you close it and you forget to upload that photo. That's fine. So long as you have that photo, you can come to us via live chat or email and just say, hey, I closed this listing before I could upload a photo. Would you please upload this photo for me? And we'd be happy to do so after reviewing the photo, of course. So that will wrap it up for photo issues. At this time, do I have any questions about any of the topics I've covered so far?
I haven't seen anything in the chat yet.
Perfect. Okay, I'll keep on rolling. So, switching gears here, inaccurate information and auto-sold listings. So this is actually two distinct violations of the rules covered by one rule. The first is just the umbrella of accurate information. So like I was saying at the beginning, accurate information is that's compliance. That is the compliance product. Our end game is to make sure that the data in the MLS that you work with is as accurate and clean as possible. One of the ways we do that is by enforcing Rule 8.3. So Rule 8.3 requires that the listing agent and by extension the listing broker, when they enter the information into the MLS, they must ensure that it is accurate and correct to the best of their knowledge and good faith efforts. So some common issues here is when, or that we see, is when a listing is entered in the MLS where tax records state it's a 3-bed, 2-bath, but the listing agent, maybe at the behest of the owner, who knows, enters a 4-bed, 2-bath. Maybe the owner wants to count a closet as a bedroom. I don't know. And in a situation like that, I would strongly recommend that you talk to your own legal counsel for guidance on what the definition of a bedroom is. But in that situation, that would technically be a violation of the rule. And not just because tax records say it's only 3 bedrooms. That's one major source, but it's not the only source. The other reason in that particular scenario would be that the bedroom that they want to claim is actually a closet. It doesn't meet the legal definition of a bedroom in California. So that's something to be aware of. Whenever a seller tells you that, hey, go ahead and count this den as a bedroom, I would recommend that you get a third opinion on that one, just to make sure that you're covering your bases. Also, if you have photo evidence, if a room was converted into a bedroom or is currently being used as a bedroom and meets the definition of a bedroom, you can count it as a bedroom. And again, I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but just for your information. But to clarify, again, Rule 8.3 requires that information entered into the MLS is accurate and correct to the best of your knowledge and good faith efforts. Auto sold. So this is a subsection of 8.3 where it is still inaccurate information, but for a different reason. The system of auto sold in the MLS is what happens when you do not manually update a listing within five calendar days of the estimated close of escrow date when you place that listing in active under contract or pending status. What that means, or what will happen actually, is that if that listing is not manually updated within 5 calendar days of that date, so 5 calendar days after, that's how long you have to correct that listing. If it's not manually updated within those 5 calendar days, then it'll be placed in what's called auto sold status by the system automatically. What will happen is you and your broker are both locked out of the listing because it's now in a finalized status of sold, and there will be a red flag next to the status sold. What that red flag indicates to anyone that's trying to run a comparable or they're trying to look at the property is that that listing was not manually verified before it was finalized, and as such is almost worthless as data. And that's what this system aims to prevent. You actually get several notifications by both the system and via email prior to a listing about to enter auto sold status. You get a total of 14 actually before it even comes to the compliance department. The first goes out 14 days prior to the the estimated close of escrow date. So on each of these days, you'll get both a system notification once you log into Matrix and an email notification. So there's 2 on each day, so a total of 14 notices. First is 14 days prior, and then 7 days prior, and then 1 day prior. You get one the day of, and then you'll get 2 more, well, sorry, 1 more technically, 3 days prior and 5 days prior. After, I apologize. You'll get them 3 days after and 5 days after. So again, a total of 14 notifications from the system. 1 via Matrix login notice and 1 via email notice. That is the system pleading with you to please update that listing manually. Either extend the estimated close of escrow date to prevent it from going into auto sold if escrow is taking a little bit longer, or manually enter the closing information to signify obviously the listing is closed. Again, if a listing falls into auto sold status, it is a violation of Rule 8.3 to not update your listing. Now, this is a particular violation of the rules that qualifies for a warning notice. So on top of those 14, potentially, if it's more than 14 days prior, on top of those 14 notices that you get from both the system and email, once this comes to my department, you'll also get a warning notice. So at this point, we're at 15 notices. And the reason I harp on this so much is because this is a very hard citation to get. It's once you get it, after all those system notifications and the warning notice that we'll send you, once it gets to that point, I mean, like I said, it's a very hard citation to get. So once you start receiving those notices from the system, that's your cue to go in there and manually update that listing. Now, if you don't update the listing and it does fall into auto sold status, again, that is technically a violation of Rule 8.3. Now, if you come to us and say, hey, I didn't update this listing, it's in auto sold status now, can you help me out? If you can provide the status and or sale information to us via either email or chat, we will correct that listing for you. If additional documentation is required, we will ask for it from you. For instance, if you say that the listing should be in active status, indicating that the purchase contract was terminated, we will request that cancellation of purchase contract documentation. Otherwise, if you say, hey, listing's sold, just give us the sale information. We'll correct it for you. If you say a listing escrow is taking longer, give us that new estimated close of escrow date and confirm which of those 2 pending statuses it should be in, and we'll correct it for you. Now, like I said, if you do come to us before a citation is issued, you'll head off that citation. Say that you've missed all 14 of those notifications and you finally get a warning notice from my department. and you either fill out that auto sold correction form that's included in the notice, or you just come to us via live chat or email and say, hey, I got this warning notice. Can we correct this listing? Great. We're happy to take the information from you and correct the listing on your behalf and close the case out. Like I said, a very difficult citation to get.
Hey, Ray.
Yes.
So, I mean, I understand the importance of this whole section right here and making sure data is accurate. What does the MLS or the CRMLS do to hold third-party sites, i.e. Zillow, Realtor.com, things like that, accountable? I mean, they're on automatic feeds from the CRMLS and things like that, pulling that data into their sites, but yet there are a lot of properties that show on those sites that will show active a week plus after it's been pending.
Okay, so there are. That's a great question. So we do have those VOW and IDX links, the data feeds that go to small broker websites, individual agent websites. In the case of VO or IDX, and in the case of VOW, you have the big ones like Zillow, Trulia, so on and so forth. So those IDX agreements and VOW agreements that they sign with us have requirements that they have to meet. And one of those requirements is a timely refresh of the data. Now, working with computers, unfortunately, sometimes there are glitches in that chain. And I've seen it myself where occasionally one of them, I'm not going to say who, one of the services did not have a up-to-date feed of a listing. All it took on our part was a member reported it to us. All it took on our part was for our Tier 2 department to correspond with them, and they manually repulled the data, and that solved the issue. Now, that being said, these IDX agreements, if you have a question about specifically what those agreements require that these third-party sites do or what requirements they have to meet in order to still be eligible for that data, that would be a good question for our licensing department. So I wouldn't be able to answer a question about that on this presentation, unfortunately. But you can reach our licensing department via email at licensing@crmls.org if you have any questions specific to how those agreements work, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I know that is a huge topic of conversation, especially when agents hear of violations or agents complain about other agents that aren't following these timely guidelines of getting things updated or
Absolutely.
moving status from one to the other. And it is frustrating on everybody's part, in the industry when they pay for a service that is then selling that data elsewhere, or giving that data, I should say, not necessarily selling, but giving that data elsewhere, but then that data is not held to the same standard or accurate a lot of times.
Okay, so no, I see I see the point you're making, and I can absolutely confirm that those data licensing agreements that a third party has to sign and agree to in order to be eligible for that feed, they're very articulate and they're very restrictive. So one of the things that a lot of people may not even be aware of is that part of those agreements is that when displaying data from the MLS, you have to give listing attribution. So that's basically, you have to state the source. Source is MLS number whatever provided by listing agent, listing office.
Uh-huh.
That's a requirement, and a lot of agents aren't aware of that. Now, as far as the provision of data via these data licensing links, if you have any more questions about that, or you have maybe a grievance with how it's handled, that would be a good question or email to send to our licensing department. Or if there's a more overarching change that you would like to see made in that process or how it's handled, you can do that officially by contacting the MLS committee or your local association.
Perfect. One question did come in.
Here we go.
So before we get a little bit too far off the thing, maybe this one can be answered. Are you able to see the chat?
Yes. Yeah, I'll go ahead and read the question here. The question is, can I use one photo from Zillow for my listing under status coming soon until the house get ready to take professional photos? That is an excellent question. Thank you for asking. Short answer, absolutely not. The photo from Zillow is owned by, or at least at that point, it's owned by Zillow, or if it's from CRMLS, it would be owned by CRMLS. So a listing being in coming soon status, it's not exempt from the photo ownership requirements. And again, that's why this is such a good question, is because this is something that I've seen come up more than once. So again, thank you for asking. But again, short answer is no, long answer. In order to use a photo or any piece of media on the MLS, regardless of the status of the listing or the status the listing is in, you absolutely do need to either own that photo or have obtained the rights and licenses to reproduce it on the MLS. Does that answer your question? Or if you have any follow-ups, please post it in the chat.
And so one last question on that then is, if once photos are posted on the MLS and the MLS has been given rights to that photo, why can't a photo be reproduced on your site again, considering the MLS owns it at that point?
So that's also a very good question. And what it comes down to is media copyright and ownership. So if someone uploads a photo that, let's say that all the rules are followed, they upload a photo that they own to a listing in the MLS. Now they still own the original copy of that photo. There's no contention there. And if, say, someone's listing, unfortunately, bad things happen and they're not able to get it sold and the listing expires. Say that they get contacted by the owner a month or two later and like, hey, I want to relist my property, let's do this. And that listing agent still has copies of their original photos, they can absolutely reuse those. Now, the issue would come if they copied photos from the MLS that contain that MLS watermark. And again, that's by uploading media to the MLS, you're representing and warranting that you own all those rights and licenses, such as ownership, or you've obtained them from the owner. Because by uploading that media, you convey those rights to CRMLS. And that's why once you upload those photos, it'll have that CRMLS watermark there on the bottom right corner. Now, what that does is it protects both you, because you either went out and took those photos yourself, or you paid someone to do it on your behalf. Now, if I was an agent, and again, full disclaimer, I'm not a licensed real estate professional, but if I was an agent and I was in a situation where I'd paid, and I've seen some of these photographers charge, if I'd paid that amount of money to someone to go take these photos for me so I can have a really good picture of this listing, and then I see the photos I paid for show up on someone else's listing a year from now, I would be incensed, to say the least, because I paid for those photos, whereas this other party did not, and they just went in there and copied mine. So hopefully, that by providing some context there, that kind of outlines why the photo ownership is such a serious issue.
Right.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just know that was a thought process in quite a few heads, so I figured I'd go ahead and ask it.
No, thank you. And again, so those are both great questions. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide here. But again, if any pressing questions come up, please let me know. Okay, so public remarks restrictions. This is under Rule 12.5. So the public remarks fields are going to be, but not limited to, here's some good examples, the property description, directions, and photo captions. Those are all public-facing text fields, and they're going to fall under this rules and regulations. So it's referring to the property description here by name. The property description field should be used to describe the property's physical and aesthetic characteristics only. So as the rule is written, it states that the property description field should only relate to the condition, description, or marketing of the property represented in the listing. The property description field may not include, and there's a good list here, gate codes, there is a field for that. Showing instructions, there is a field for that. Compensation information, there's also a field for that. Same with lockbox information. Occupancy status of the property. So a public-facing text field cannot indicate the current occupancy status of the property. A fairly tame example of this would be, say on a residential listing or residential income listing, current tenants or current long-term tenants are good paying their rent. That indicates the current occupancy status of the property, and you could not have it in a public-facing text field. A more egregious example of this would be something I saw a couple years ago, where in the property description, the listing agent stated that there was a 6-year-old child home alone between the hours of, it was 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. in the property description. That's obviously a major safety hazard. So that would be a violation of this rule, because again, and indicates the current occupancy status of that property. Now, the statement that a property will be delivered vacant is actually not a violation. For instance, again, in a residential income listing, say that's actually, I would consider that marketing myself. But the statement that a listing will be delivered vacant is not a violation. But any other statement about the current occupancy status of the property would be a violation of this rule.
So to state that the property currently has tenants under contract till the end of, say, a certain date would be a violation.
Correct, yes. Now, there is a good field to convey that information, though. That would be the private remarks, which is directed towards other agents. So the other agent's going to see that listing on the MLS, and they can relate to their client that, hey, this listing does currently have tenants, and they're in there until this date. But to confirm, yes, in the proper description, that verbiage would be a violation. Branded information. This one's fairly straightforward. Email addresses, website addresses, phone numbers, agent or brokerage information. Something we've seen that I think a lot of members think is a little bit more innocent than it actually is brokerage name is proud to present, something like that. So Century 21 is proud to present, Keller Williams is proud to present, something like that. Or even if they name their team, their real estate team, like Hernandez team is proud to present, something like that. That's all branded information and could not be included in the property description of a listing. First and foremost, because it doesn't relate to the marketing description or condition of the property. By identifying yourself as an agent or your brokerage as another real estate practitioner, you're not marketing the property, you're marketing yourself or that brokerage. So that should be fairly clear as to why that would be a violation.
One thing that is seen quite a bit is properties that are auction properties.
Yes.
And the auction name being listed in that description, as well as the web link to where they could go to bid on it.
Absolutely, and that's a good point. So we actually do have a section of the rules, off the top of my head, I believe it's 7.18.3, which goes over the requirements for auction listings. That rule outlines, I believe, 6 items that every auction listing must display on the listing. The caveat there is that the only one of those requirements that can be just shown in a public facing text field is the list price, which is to be the starting auction price. Anything else that is required, such as the name of or the date, time, and location of the auction, whether or not there's a buyer's premium involved, whether or not the seller will accept an offer prior to the auction. That's all required, but it's all required to be in the agent information. So the name of the auction website cannot be in the property description, to answer your question. The date, time, and location of the auction cannot be in the property description. The only auction requirement item that can be in a public-facing text field is the list price, which again is the minimum acceptable bid price. So I would ask, if anyone does see a listing like that where there's auction information in a public-facing text field, please submit a report on that listing so we can get it corrected. If that answers your question.
Yep.
Perfect. Let's see. Okay, so again, phone numbers, agent or brokerage information, not allowed in a public-facing text field. Open house information, despite what a lot of members may think, that is actually not the condition, description, or marketing of the property. There is a field for open house information. So open house information would not be allowed in a public-facing text field. The last one here, language that violates applicable fair housing laws and guidelines. So we actually have a guideline for this on our website in our knowledge base. It's the fair housing laws, acceptable keywords and phrases. And there's 3 categories, green, yellow, and red, corresponding to a stop sign or a traffic light. So anything under the green section is, they do not consider that an issue. Anything under the yellow section is to be used with caution. I believe elderly is one of the words on there. And then anything under the red section is overtly a violation of fair housing laws and guidelines, and obviously Rule 12.5. Just the cliff notes on that, anything that is openly discriminatory or offensive would be considered a violation of this rule. And that actually applies to any text field. There was one listing where that I was looking at where it was a room for rent lease listing, where the listing agent said they're only accepting female applications between 18 and 25. That's obviously a violation of this rule because it's openly discriminatory. So anytime you see something like that, please, again, submit a report on that listing so that we can get it corrected and bring it to within compliance.
And so just to reiterate, in this field, it would be a violation to put no showings until October 17th, etc.
That is correct. Yeah, that would fall under showing instructions.
Right. Okay.
But yes, that's a good question. Thank you. So as in photo media,
Sorry, I have a quick question because I
please.
have to run to appointment. In a description, would it be possible to place the guest house rent out for such amount and tenants prefer to stay?
So that's a good question. The first answer to the first part of the question would be yes. You can include the rent for, like for instance, if it's a residential income listing, absolutely. You can include the rent amounts in the property description because that would be both a description of the property and marketing. Now,
Okay,
as far
great.
as indicating the occupancy status, that could not be in the property description. So I would strongly caution you to avoid any verbiage which indicates a tenant, occupancy, vacant, things like that. And the system will actually, if it detects those words, it'll give you a little notification saying, hey, we found something that might be a violation of this rule. Why don't you go back there and double check it? So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Okay, let's see. So we do have two fields where you can use branded information. And there, you can see them in there by this, this green header that they have. Every other field is a blue header. So the first field I want to talk about is the syndication remarks. So this is a field where you can say something like, you know, for instance, Kelly Williams is proud to present, or for more information, text Ray at 123456, you know, phone number. You can put that in this field and this field alone. Now, if you ever have any questions about this, because this is a violation of rules that does not qualify for a warning notice. So caution is the better part of valor here. If you ever do have any questions about any verbiage that you want to use in a field in the MLS, please contact us via live chat. We can get you an answer within a couple seconds. Moving on here, virtual tour URL branded. So this is the one field in the MLS where you can enter the link to a branded virtual tour. Say that you wanted to give your own, you know, pre-recorded virtual tour, you know, where you're walking through the house followed by somebody with a camera. That'd be fine in this field alone, the virtual tour URL branded. There are two other fields called virtual tour URL unbranded and 1 and 2. Those fields cannot contain any branding. So again, I would implore you, if you ever have any doubts about something you want to use on the MLS, please contact us via live chat or email, and we are happy to review it and let you know if it's something you can do.
Can I ask one question before we move on, just to clarify something? On a tour, let's say an agent goes to a home and shoots a video walking through the house, is verbally explaining the features of the home in that video, but does not give their name, their phone number, the company they work for, anything else other than their voice. Is that classified as branded?
That's a great question. Yes, it would be considered branding. And the reason for that, as counterintuitive as it may seem, is that the agent's voice, their diction and syntax could be considered branding. For instance, if an agent has a certain way of speaking, a certain a cadence, and that identifies them. You know, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but they are out there. But the reason that narration is not allowed on an unbranded virtual tour is because it could be considered branding. For instance, there's certain movie stars, you know, you just hear their voice and you know exactly who it is. For instance, Morgan Freeman. If a virtual tour, if he was a real estate agent and he uploaded a virtual tour with his voice narrating, everyone would know who that is. And obviously that's a very extreme example, but it is an example of why that is considered branding, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So mandatory submission rule 7.9. So this is actually a change that was recently implemented because of the adoption of the clear cooperation policy. And that's something that I'm actually going to go into. This is starting the second half of the presentation. So what the rule requires, 7.9, mandatory submission upon marketing. The rule is written out there verbatim for you. I'll give you the cliff notes. Effectively, what it does is it requires that within 1 business day of first marketing or advertising a property to the public, that listing must be submitted to the MLS under active or coming soon status. Let's see here, some more examples I can go into. So marketing is actually defined here within the context of the rule as signs, websites, social media, brokerage or franchise operated websites, yard signs, even a conversation that you have with someone about this property's availability for sale would be considered marketing.
I got a question on this one.
Oh, please go ahead.
It says from marketing a property. What if an agent puts out on wherever, social media or anywhere else, and just says, I have a property that is due to hit the market in a week. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,700 square feet located in the Morgan Hill community. It doesn't give any specifics as far as address or anything like that to the property.
So technically, yes, that would be a violation of the rule if that property was not submitted to the MLS. Now, I want to back it up a little bit, though, because in this situation, we haven't established that there's a listing contract in effect.
Correct.
So moving forward, whenever I say listing, what I'm referring to is a property for which the listing broker has an executed contract. Obviously, if there's no listing contract in place and a member wants to market that property, I'm not going to say listing, if they want to market that property, then this rule will not apply. Now, as far as guidance on the marketing of a property for which there is no effective listing contract, I would strongly recommend that anyone that's interested in that talk to the professional standards committee at their local association and also their broker. I was giving a presentation one time where an agent asked a similar question. You know, if they can market a property for which they don't have a contract yet to beat days on market, I'll give the answer. It would not be a violation of the rules to do so because there's no listing contract in effect, and ergo the rules would not apply. Before I can finish my sentence, the broker cut me off and said, "You will absolutely not do that." And that's, again, not giving any business advice here. I'm just saying that's someone you're going to want to talk to before engaging in a practice like that. But again, to go back to the specific question that was asked, if there is a listing contract in effect and the property is to be withheld from entry into the MLS, such as via an SELM, once that property is marketed in any way, shape, or form, such as, let's say, a post on social media which identifies, hey, I've got a property coming up in a certain community, it's a 3-bed, 2-bath, this many square feet, bypassing the fact that we could probably identify what property that is based on that information alone, that would be a violation of the rule. And it's something that I would strongly discourage for someone who doesn't want to commit a violation of these rules. Now, I will go into, I think I've spent enough time probably on this slide, but I will go into later a major change that we've implemented, and someone mentioned it earlier, coming soon status, which allows our members to both comply with the requirements of the clear cooperation policy and obtain some pre-market exposure for their properties or their listings without accruing days on market. And I'll go into that more later. Did you have any follow-ups on that one?
No.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll go into that more later. And personally, I think the coming soon status is it's a great addition to the MLS for our members who do want to attain some pre-market exposure without accruing days on market. And I'll go into more how that works. So, marketing defined. Number one, who is the public? The public is anyone who has not signed the CAR Form AD, disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship, with your listing office within the past calendar year. I'm sorry, within the past year. So that form, I don't have an example I can bring up here, but it is available on Zip Forms. And what that form does is it effectively just creates agency between this person and your office, effectively making them a client of your office. So someone who has signed that form with your office within the past year is not considered a member of the public as far as marketing goes within the rules and regulations. Second one would be an agent that works at the same brokerage that you do. So now what we're talking about here is another agent that works under the same broker's license that you do. say for instance, Keller Williams, obviously I keep going back to them, but they're just a great example of this, but they have so many offices under so many different brokers. It's a good example to bring up because talking to a property that you have, or talking about a property that you have with another agent at another Keller Williams office, let's say under a different broker, that actually would be considered marketing. Whereas if you talk to another agent within your same office, working under the same broker that you are about that property, that would not be considered marketing. Hopefully I was able to elucidate that for everyone. Anyone have any questions about how that works? None? Perfect. Okay. So number 2, what? Some examples of marketing. And I went over this before, but here's some visual examples. Obviously Zillow, Realtor.com. You can manually enter a listing into those platforms yourself. Down there, a presentation, say a big AOR or broker meetup, and they have those sections where you come up and showcase some listings that you have. That would be considered marketing. Social media, obviously, your own websites, any public-facing website. Like I said, a conversation even. Yard signs, coming soon signs, email blasts, neighborhood flyers, neighborhood market reports. Those are all forms of marketing. So anytime, if you have a property that's not in the MLS, or sorry, I should say a listing that's not in the MLS yet, and you communicate it through any of these means, then that's considered marketing. That property must be entered in the MLS under active or coming soon status within 1 business day of that marketing. So I mentioned a property being withheld from the MLS. Let's see here. Actually, I did get a question that I want to address real quick. The question is, what about pocket deals or off-market deals? Sometimes owners request confidentiality for a set amount of time. Absolutely. That's actually a great time to ask that question because that's exactly what I'm going to go over right now. But short answer is, for any listing where you have the seller that does not want to enter the MLS or market it in any way, shape, or form, those two go hand in hand, then what you would do is you would obtain and have them sign the seller instruction to exclude listing from MLS, or SELM. That form will let you set forth, or let the seller set forth, I should say, the amount of time the listing will both not be marketed and not entered in the MLS. Now again, as of the adoption of the Clear Cooperation Policy, it is no longer possible to market a listing, I should say. It is no longer possible to market a listing without entering it into the MLS. That is a requirement that was set in place by the NAR Clear Cooperation Policy, and it's something that most agents out there now have to comply with. So, but yes, I will answer your question in more detail here in the next few slides. So, the new process here, if you have a listing, step 1, you have a listing. Seller signs a listing contract. So step 2, you have 1 or 2 here you can do. 2A, listing broker has 2 business days from the listing contract date, and by listing broker, obviously the listing agent, has 2 business days from the listing contract date to input the listing into the MLS as either excluded or coming soon or active. Now, in lieu of excluded via the obtaining of a SELM, seller instruction to exclude, what you're going to do is you're going to enter it in under registered status, but I'll go into that more later. So, but those are your 3 options within 2 business days of the effective date of your listing contract. Now on the bottom there, within 1 business day of marketing, the property, the listing broker must ensure that listing is in the MLS under active or coming soon status. So to give you the cliff notes here, it's going to be whichever is shorter, either within 2 business days of the effective date of your contract or within 1 business day of marketing, you're going to have to enter that listing in the MLS under coming soon or active status. If a property is never marketed, the listing does not need to be placed into coming soon or active status. Now, I got that question previously about a listing that the seller does not want marketed or in the MLS at all. And for that, you're going to use what's called registered status. So I'm going to go through the differences here between these 2 statuses. Coming soon status. So this is the new change that we've rolled out for our members to account for the adoption of the Clear Cooperation Policy. And what it does, again, effectively, is it allows you to obtain some pre-market exposure for that property, or that listing, I should say, prior to it going fully on market, and thus you will not accrue days on market. So for coming soon status, there is a coming soon form that you must obtain and have the seller sign and fill out. You don't have to submit that form to CRMLS unless we request it from you, but it is available on our website and via zip forms. Now, unequivocally, that coming soon form is required to be obtained, signed, and filled out by the seller prior to that listing being entered into the MLS. Now, positives. You can fully market a property in coming soon status. Yard signs, email blasts, neighborhood flyers, in-person conversations. That's all on the table. The property in coming soon status can be fully marketed. It is displayed in the MLS, so other agents and brokerages can find that listing in coming soon status. Now, the flip side, commission has to be offered. So in filing that listing with the MLS, the listing broker is required to make some offer of compensation to a potential buyer broker, as is the same with almost every other listing. No days on market. I touched on this earlier. A listing in coming soon status will not accrue days on market while it's in that status. There's limited distribution. So coming soon listings are not shared through VOW data feeds, and that's going to include Zillow, Trulia, those really big websites. Coming soon listings will not be shared from CRMLS to those websites. Now they are shared, hence the limited distribution, via IDX feeds. Now those are feeds from that a broker or agent can obtain for their own website. So they are shared via that way. Something to bear in mind, Redfin is technically a brokerage, and they do have an IDX feed. So coming soon listings will show up on Redfin's website. No showings. A listing in coming soon status cannot be shown to anyone. It can be fully marketed, but it cannot be shown. Also, a listing in coming soon status can only be in that status for a maximum of 21 calendar days. Now, you don't have to use the full 21 calendar days. You can have it in coming soon status for 1 day, 5 days, 10 days. It's up to you and the seller. But it can only be in coming soon status for a maximum of 21 calendar days from the day it's entered in coming soon status. Once a listing leaves coming soon status, that's it. It can no longer be placed in coming soon status after that. So, registered status is quite a bit different. So registered status has replaced the old listing exclusion process, So for registered status, again, this is
I have a question real quick.
So yes, please.
As far as the coming soon, I've heard that with any marketing that you do, whether it be social media, flyers, all that, it does have to have the first day that showings are allowed, correct?
That is absolutely correct. Yes, that's a great question. So yes, any marketing materials such as yard sign, flyer, even a personal conversation, of course, you're going to have to indicate the day that that listing will be fully on market, so to speak. So that'd be the start showing date. So what I've seen members do is they have that coming soon yard sign on their listing, and there's just there's a rider on there or just a tab that says on market on X date or active on X date, however you want to phrase it. But it does have to clearly indicate the date that the listing will move from coming soon to an on market status, if that answers your question. Okay.
Yes, I was just clarifying. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. No, thank you for asking. That's a very good question. So going back to registered status here, again, this replaced the old exclusion form process. And the question that was just asked about pocket deals or off-market deals, this is what's going to apply to that. So a form is still required. So there's either a listing contract, the new revision, which includes verbiage in which the seller can state that the listing will not be on the market, or it will not be marketed or entered the MLS for a certain period of time. Or if you just want to be safe, you can use the old standby, the CAR form SELM, which is again available on zip forms. You can have the seller fill that form out because it clearly indicates the date that the property will be fully on market and entered in the MLS, or it indicates that the listing will not be entered in the MLS or marketed for the entire listing term. And there's options on there, so that would be a good form to use. But you do have to still obtain that form. Now the difference is you no longer have to submit that form to CRMLS, again, unless we request it from you. What you're going to do instead is you're going to what's called register listing contract. So it's a new option in the MLS for you to register these excluded listings that are effectively invisible. Only you and your broker can see them. No marketing. So a registered listing cannot be marketed in any way, shape, or form, hence the exclusion period. So again, like I was saying before, it is, as of the adoption of the Clear Cooperation Policy in May of this year, it is no longer possible to market a listing and not enter it in the MLS. Registered listings are not displayed in the MLS, like I was saying. Only the listing agent, listing broker, office managers, and MLS staff, of course, can see that registered listing. It's not searchable. No one outside the listing agent, broker, and office managers or MLS staff can see that listing. No compensation is required to be offered. Again, because this listing is not being offered for cooperation, it is excluded. It's not marketed, so no compensation is required to be offered. While in that status, no DOM. This is not an on-market listing, so it will not accrue days on market. There's absolutely no distribution to the MLS, so it's not shared with third-party websites via VOW or IDX feeds. Again, this listing is for all intents and purposes completely invisible.
I have a quick comment, if that's okay.
Please.
Last year sometime, one of the agents called, I'm Mary Jane with Granite Escrow. I was hired to bring, I'm also a licensed broker, and I was hired to bring broker level answers to our escrow clientele. And one of the client's questions I got last year was, the homeowner was a FSBO. The contract had already been negotiated when the seller asked the agent not to represent them, but to do their side of the transaction paperwork wise. And they called me and said, given the new rules, I'm not allowed to, I don't think I can do the other side. I don't think I can accept any money for doing the paperwork on the other side. And my answer was simply don't list it. We switched to a different compensation agreement, a commission agreement, and we stayed away from all the duties that come with an MLS listing agreement. One of the most common mistakes I see as a broker is people using listing agreements to earn funds when they are not going to do the full duties that are obligated by the MLS, and they've gotten more stringent now. So one of the things I'm going to suggest to Tommy is that we have a compensation agreement class here coming up soon, because there's 5 or 6 agreements that allow you to earn money without risking. Even if the seller understood you weren't going to put it on the market or anything, once you sign that listing agreement, you have accepted those obligations, and that is part of the arrangement. So I want to make sure you guys remember not to use listing agreements as compensation agreements, and that there are other forms to allow you to earn money other ways without accepting all the risk and liability and obligations that go with an MLS listing agreement.
Thank you. No, that's really good information. Something I would like to point out is that a FSBO, or for sale by owner listing, or, well, it's not even a listing, or a property for which there's a compensation or single party compensation agreement, or SPCA as we call them, those aren't listings, and as such, like you said, effectively they can't be listed in the MLS because there's no listing contract. Now, one thing I would like to point out is that if there was documentation used during the course of that transaction which provides a broker with the ability to list it in the MLS, and that listing agent does want to enter it in the MLS as a comparable listing entry, that's completely fine. Again, because it's not technically a listing, it's just a comparable listing entry. And in that case, for more help doing that, please contact us, live chat, email. We're happy to walk somebody through that process, because ultimately that's more data, and we love data. But yes, I absolutely agree with everything you said. You're absolutely correct as far as the MLS goes, for sure. Did anyone have any questions about what you just said? Or at least within the context of the MLS, I should say.
No, but there was a question that came across chat.
Yes, about Zillow, I believe.
Yeah, because everybody knows Zillow announced within the last month that they potentially are going to start hiring agents as a brokerage, et cetera.
Yes. Okay. So I see that question here. Again, the question is, read an article that Zillow will become a brokerage soon. Will the IDX coming soon listing transfer to coming soon properties as well? So that would depend on if once they become a licensed brokerage, if they change to an IDX feed, then yes, they would receive the same IDX feed as everyone else. Or as every other one. Well,
I mean, at that point, wouldn't they have to switch over if they're an operating brokerage where they employ agents, because they're saying they're going to hire agents, and those agents obviously are listing properties? they need to put them on the MLS, they would fall under the same category then as all us other agents, correct?
As far as the requirements of the rules and regulations, yes. Now, as far as the specifics of any kind of contract that they might have or what they might enter into, I wouldn't be able to answer questions of that nature on this presentation, and that's something I would greatly recommend that you direct to our licensing department, because they could help you out with that and clarify some things as to how those contracts work.
Yeah, because that can open a whole new can of worms when they become a brokerage for them. If they're a brokerage and the Zillow site stays completely separate from the brokerage, and that's not following the same regulations as their brokerage is when it pertains to the CRMLS and the guidelines, i.e. things on the site that aren't updated and accurate, that opens a whole different can of worms.
No, I agree. I mean, we are kind of talking about more of a hypothetical situation here.
Yeah.
I don't know what the future holds. And then as far as how the politics or how the real world impacts of what they may or may not do, I couldn't speculate, unfortunately.
Right.
All I can really do is talk about the rules and regulations, and if they do become a brokerage, then they would be accountable to all the rules and regulations that apply to brokerages under the CRMLS rules and regulations. So let's see here. I don't believe I wrapped this one up. The last thing I want to talk about with registered status is showings. So a listing in registered status can be shown, but only to one of two parties. One, another agent that works under the same broker that you do, or anyone who has signed that CAR Form AD within the last year. So again, to clarify, a registered listing can be shown to an agent that works under the same broker that you do, or a member of the public that has signed that CAR Form AD and is no longer effectively a member of the public, they're a broker client.
I have one more quick comment there, talking about getting agency signed.
Yes.
The agency is the number one rule that we learn when we're day one in real estate and our day one in our tests, and it's repeated over and over again. And for those of you who don't know it, agency is the first test of procuring cause. So when you call a broker, your broker, and say you believe you are the procuring cause, the first test is the signed agency. Please remember that agency is just an advisory. It is not a compensation agreement, and it is not a binding agreement on the buyer whatsoever. So this rule actually helps you get that agency signed, which would begin to protect your procuring cause cases down the road somewhere. So I found this a very useful place for you to bring agency front and center again. So I just wanted to quick slip that in.
No, that's perfect. That's great information. Okay, let's see. I already talked about who can see these listings. Again, registered listings are effectively invisible. Only the listing agent, listing broker, office managers, and MLS staff can see them. Coming soon listings, however, are fully visible on the MLS and do have limited listing distribution.
Now, will they be opening up coming soon to IDX feed out to all other sites?
That is a good question. Unfortunately, it's not one that I can answer. I don't know the answer. That would be a good question for our licensing department. Which again, if anyone hasn't heard me say it yet, you can reach our licensing department via email at licensing@crmls.org. So the coming soon form here, I did allude to this previously. And this form is available on our website and via zip forms. And what this form is written instruction from the seller to you as the listing agent to enter this listing in the MLS under coming soon status for a certain period of time. And again, it says on there not to exceed 21 days after entry into coming soon status. Again, all you have to do is have the seller fill this out and sign it, and then you just have to keep a copy on file. You do not need to submit this form once it is completed to CRMLS unless we request it from you. Now, again, that caveat, this form must be filled out and signed by the seller prior to the listing being entered in the MLS under coming soon status. Entering a coming soon listing matrix. The process is fairly straightforward. What you'll do now that the status is in there is you'll enter a listing as normal, but under the status tab right there, next to the basics tab, is you have a selection of either coming soon or active status. So again, typically, unless any other documentation was filled out, you're going to enter that listing in under active status. If the seller did sign that coming soon form prior to you entering that listing, then what you'll do is you'll select coming soon. And then from that status tab, you'll move over to the Office MLS tab, where you'll enter the start showing date. Now I'm going to backtrack a slide here, but that start showing date is going to be the date there right under property address where it says start showing dates. That is a one-to-one duplication of that figure.
Can that be altered down the road? Like, for instance, say they're going to do some repairs or something like that, and you put it, you're going to put the status as coming soon. Let's say you put it in there as 21 days from when it's signed. But because you think you're going to need that amount of time to get the work done, but then let's say 14 days in, the work's done and they're like, make it active. You can alter that price as long as it's not more than 21 days, correct?
They can alter that field, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you can go ahead and
that goes
update it
back
and
to
say,
what I
okay, we're going to go active now. It doesn't, but at that 21 days, that 21 days cannot be extended. As
correct. And I will talk about an option that you have if circumstances dictate that the listings stay in coming soon status, quote unquote. But yes, to answer your question in short form, you absolutely can alter that field. So say that you do want to, say that you use the full 21 calendar days for construction or something of that nature, and it turns out that it's finished ahead of schedule, and the seller says, hey, I want this on the market, fully on the market, ready for showings. Okay, great. What you'll do is you'll just go in there and change the status to active.
Okay.
Now, on the reverse side of that, if you've used the full 21 calendar day time frame there, and it turns out that the listing will not be ready for full market exposure yet, what you can do with the seller's written instruction, of course, is place that listing in hold status. Hold status carries pretty much the same restrictions and benefits as coming soon status. The difference being that it's indefinite, and a listing in hold status doesn't have any listing distribution. So if that situation happens where the seller, for some reason or other, says that they want the listing in a status like this for longer than 21 calendar days, what you'll do is before the listing changes to active, you'll go in there and change it to hold status on the seller's request. Hold status will prevent the accumulation of days on market. So listing in hold status will not accrue days on market while in that status. The listing can be fully marketed, same as coming soon. And also it cannot be shown, same as coming soon. So a listing in hold status is effectively still, I'm not gonna say it's still in coming soon status because there is one major difference, but it does provide you with a lot of the same restrictions and benefits of coming soon status. The major difference is that a listing in hold status is not distributed. So there, instead of coming soon's limited distribution, there is zero distribution. So that's something to be aware of. But it is a tool available to you should a situation like that arise. So switching gears here to registered listings. To enter a registered listing into the MLS, what you'll do is under that Add Edit tab there, you'll just click on Register Listing Contract. And what that does is it takes you to a regular listing input form. But what it is, a registered listing is effectively just a listing in incomplete status. It's a not fully submitted listing at that point. And that's all you'll do right there. Click on Registered Listing Contract, and then from there you'll continue to input as normal.
And now, if it goes in as a registered listing contract, that could easily be switched over to a full listing contract.
Absolutely, yes.
Without having to like re-input all the data over again.
Correct, yes. So once you have all that there, at the point in time where the listing will go fully on market either, and you can still switch it to coming soon status from there, I believe, if you want to, or active status.
Okay.
But once you're going to submit it as a full listing, what you'll do is you'll just go in there and change the status to active or coming soon. Again, now a listing in registered status, if the seller wants it in coming soon status, you'll still need to get that coming soon form signed prior to the listing going into coming soon status. So let's say, for example, you've got a situation where the seller said they wanted their listing off market and not in the MLS for 2 months. So that's a registered listing. You'll go in there and you'll register that listing within 2 business days of your listing contract's effective date. Now that 2-month time period is drawing to a close, and the seller's fully okay with the listing going, full on the market. what you'll do, or no, I'm sorry, let's say the seller wants it in coming soon status before it goes active, but they haven't signed the coming soon form yet. That's actually fine. You just need to have that form signed by the seller prior to the listing going into coming soon status. So let's say the day before that listing is supposed to go active, you have the seller sign and fill out the coming soon form. Now you're good to go. You can go ahead and enter it, or you can go ahead and change it to coming soon status.
Gotcha.
So I've got some good news. That wraps up the informative portion of this presentation. Right now, I'm just going to go through some reminders of some resources that we have available to everyone, and then I'll open it up for questions. So, broker resources. CRMLS is broker driven. We work to keep our brokers as informed and up to date as possible. We do that via resources we have on our Root website: syndication management, broker training, dedicated support number for brokers, educational resources. That's all available at crmls.org/brokers. Education. So more of a broader appeal here. CRMLS offers a variety of training and education resources for all of our members. We have a robust knowledge base for both regular questions or even compliance-related issues. We have full-time system experts on staff. We offer in-person classes at association and brokerages, live and recorded webinars such as this one, and how-to videos. And like I said, that robust knowledge-based library. Odds are, if you have a question, there's going to be an answer to that question in that knowledge base somewhere. It is substantial. And you'll find all this at crmls.org/education. So support. We do offer a certified Center of Excellence customer service or customer care department. They offer live phone support and ticketing system, and they are available 7 days a week. They're extensively trained on all MLS product and services, including all 3 MLS systems that we currently have: Matrix, Paragon, and Flex. You can reach them via those 2 phone numbers right there. And also, those phone numbers, as well as their live chat link, are available on our website, crmls.org/support. So my department, compliance. Again, like I said, the end game of our department is to maintain clean and accurate data. We're typically the first point of contact for anyone that wants to report a possible violation of the rules. What we do is we investigate, clarify, and correct data inaccuracies and enforce the MLS rules. Now, we are available via live chat and email 5 days a week. During normal business hours during the week, our live chat is available. And if you need to get in touch with us ASAP, or you need a very quick answer to your question, live chat is by far the best way to get in contact with us. If you send us an email, we will respond to it. And depending on the volume of emails we received recently, that may be a couple days, unfortunately. While we do aim to respond to emails within a day or 2 of when they're received, unfortunately, sometimes that's just not possible. But our live chat, when it is available during the week, our typical response time is 2 to 3 seconds. So, like I said, if you need a quick answer or you need an answer immediately, live chat is by far the best way to get in contact with us. You can find all these resources plus our live chat link at crmls.org/compliance. And there's a big live chat link there. It'll tell you whether it's online or not. During the week, it'll be online during normal business hours. So that concludes the presentation. I'd like to open the floor for any questions anyone may have.
Okay. Yeah, if the presentation's done, maybe we could stop sharing. That'll bring everybody into view.
Sure.
And we'll open it up for chat. Everybody, great questions throughout this.
Yes,
Ray, thank you very much for speaking with us today. If you guys have questions, now would be the time to ask them. You can feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself to be able to do that. If you can't unmute yourself, you can always raise your hand with the reactions, and we'll be able to figure out how to unmute you. Boy, I can't fathom that people don't have questions.
Well, the good news is if anyone does think of any questions, sometimes it's hard to come up with one on the spot. There was a lot of information that we just put out there right now.
Mhm.
If anyone does have any questions, please, we are available via live chat at that crmls.org/compliance link, or via email, compliance@crmls.org. Like I said, we're happy to answer any questions we get, and if there's anything we can do to help someone avoid committing a violation of the rules, we are happy to do so.
Perfect. Yeah, guys, and if you didn't get that information that he just left, you can reach out to Mary Jane or myself, and we can get you that information for you. So, all right. Well, I don't see anybody raising their hand or any questions coming in, Ray. So, I guess what we could do is say thank you for your time. We appreciate you spending the last hour and a half with us. Dropping some knowledge. I'm sure everybody here learned something today.
It's very thorough, very thorough. Thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me, everyone. I'm always happy to come out and do these presentations and get a little FaceTime with our members. And like I said, distribute as much knowledge as I can to help our members avoid committing violations.
Guys, yes, there's rules and regulations. Why there's a lot of information there that has to be managed, right? And if it was a free-for-all, it would be very chaotic. And so, if you have questions, I would say is, ask them. So ask before you do. Save yourself.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah,
please.
It's actually for the gang. Again, Ray, thank you so much for coming. You were very, very clear.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I took some notes during the class, and I was wondering whether you guys wanted to tell me whether you'd like to hear the rules and how to avoid the problems on the property images advisory next week, or whether you'd like to talk about compensation agreements. Either one of those. I made notes, and so I was wondering if anybody had a preference on, what do you think, Tommy?
I think if everybody could just open up chat and put what your preference is in there, that'll give us an idea, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking at my notes, and everything that I had kind of written down, Ray, you answered. Some that I had written down, the agents asked already. So I'd say, guys, if you come up with any questions that after this that you may want answered, go ahead and send them directly into Ray's unit, or if you don't remember that, just reach out to us and we'll get you in contact with the unit and they can answer all your questions. So with that, Ray, thank you very much for joining us. We greatly appreciate you taking the time out and answering all those questions, giving us some good insights. And guys, we'll put out, I'm going to throw this out there without commitment from her, but by Friday, we will have out what next week's Wednesday Zoom and Learn will be. So we'll figure that in the next 2 days, and then we will send that out to everybody so that you know. But again, we meet every Wednesday at 12:30, same Zoom, same link. Nothing changes there. So we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you, guys.
All right, guys, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.